Okay, we'll call to order the City Council workshop, April 10th, 6 p.m. Roll call. Kirby Moyna.
Nicole Andreath.
Sam Solars.
Dan Reamer.
David Paradise.
Michael Sommerfeld.
Jessica Bodiwell.
All right, 2022 financial statement and audit presentation. Abdo.
All right, thank you. I'm Andy Berg with Abdo's, Kirby said, here to present the 22 audit. What I'll go through tonight is the presentation. I'm not going to dig into the really thick financial statements, but if you did get a chance to look at them, I'll be happy to take any questions on those. So what I'll cover tonight, which is on page 2 of the presentation, is what the end result of that was, which will give you an opinion on your financial statements. We'll look at the general fund results, so the ending fund balance over a period of time, budget to actual statement, and then revenue and expenditure trends. Then we'll go look at your other governmental funds, so your special revenue, capital project, debt service, and then your enterprise funds, looking at a cash flow from operations and the cash balance graph, and then look at some key performance indicators in comparison to other communities of similar size in the state, and then also in this county. Feel free to jump in, ask questions as I'm going. You don't have to, I mean, that's part of the reason for the work session. You know, if you got questions, let's answer them as we go and have a discussion. So we don't need to wait till the end. So on page 3, that result of our audit, like I mentioned, we did an opinion on your financial statement. We gave an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion, so the best opinion we can have. As part of that, we do also gain an understanding of the city's internal controls. We're not testing or giving an opinion on those. But as we'll see on the next slide, there's 2 internal control findings that we did point out, similar to previous years, so we'll talk about those a little more. We also test 7 different areas of Minnesota legal compliance, from cash and investments to claims and disbursements, contract and bidding, debt service, clean report that's in the Minnesota legal compliance findings. So the 2 internal control findings are on page 4. Like I mentioned last year, very common in medium to small size organizations, whether you're a city, nonprofit, business. The first one there is preparation of financial statements. We're doing an audit and we're preparing the financial statements. The city does have some compensating controls with Jess and Michael reviewing the financial statements before we issue those in final. Also limited segregation of duties just with a small accounting staff. Really just 2 people in there. That's pointed out. Again, you do have compensating controls with your finance committee. So neither of these are, there's 3 different levels of finding: material weakness, significant deficiency, and then the control deficiency. So these are significant deficiency due to some of those compensating controls. But important to be aware of from a council perspective. So now on page 5, we'll jump into the general fund results, looking at your ending fund balance over a 5-year period and comparing that to the next year's budget. So that top row there, the orange line, is your ending fund balance. We give you a percentage as compared to the next year's budget. So at the end of 2022, the general fund balance, the orange line, was 152% of your 2023 budget. So that number's been right around that, 150-ish mark the last 3 years. 2018 and 2019 we're at about 120. You do have an internal fund balance policy where you don't want that to go below 40%. And really where that 40 to 50% comes in, your main revenue sources, your property taxes, with some state aid to your local government aid. Those come in twice a year, so really you need 40 to 50%. To meet your expenditures in the general fund for the first 6 months. So that's really where that 40% comes in from a cash flow perspective. If we look at how we arrived at that ending fund balance on page 6, we would give you a budget to actual statement. So that first row is your revenues in the general fund. And again, this is just a general fund. You have about $1,155,000 of actual revenue, which is above budget by about $38,000. Really the main contributors were in intergovernmental revenue, so we did get some ARPA funding, so the COVID funding, where you spent about $18,000 of that in 2022, which wasn't budgeted. And then also the LGA was a little bit over budget too. So with that, the ARPA money you do have at the end of the year, $344,000 still to be spent in 2023 and beyond. Expenditures came in under budget by about $144,000, so actual expenditures were $982,000. With most areas under budget, Public Works was over budget, so that was the one area that was over budget. So total revenues over expenditures about $174,000. You had budgeted transfers into like $8,500, and then you transferred out about $69,000 to close your 2020 street improvement project, which you guys just approved a couple meetings ago.
The ARPA funding, that has no deadline to be used by, right? Or does it?
It does. I believe it's 2024?
So, you have to have it spent or obligated by 2024.
So by the end of 2024, we have to have it all set aside and allocated, either spent or allocated to
A project.
something.
Spent or obligated, so I think you have to.
Like
you
be
have to
under
have it
contract for
entered
a
in
project or something.
Got
like
it,
that.
okay. You can't just budget for something and say, we're gonna use it for this, you actually have to
You have to
put
have like a plan.
a contract, okay.
Yeah. And you guys did, I mean, if it comes down to that, I'd recommend that you probably try to spend it by the end of 2024. Just wanted to alleviate some of the reporting requirements internally, and there's not, you can spend it on really any governmental services, so there's not a ton of restrictions on
Yeah, we have a few things that we're working on funding it on, so hopefully we can get that drawn down a bit.
it. So that money is sitting in your general fund cash balance. It's not part of the ending fund balance because it's really just offset with the liability of unearned revenue at this point.
Does it just go away if we don't use it by some chance, or does it go to like the county, or?
If you didn't use it, you probably have to return it somehow. I don't know the.
Because I know with the first round of the COVID money they gave out, if you didn't use it, it was sent back to your county's,
Yeah.
I think EDA,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was sent back to the counties. That was a tighter time frame of spending it. I can't imagine that any government would find a way to spend it.
Right. I was just curious.
We'll find a way to spend it.
Yeah.
Jump down to, we just pay a couple monthly bills of it.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Just make a big payment on one of our bonds.
Yeah, because there's some cities that, applied it all against public safety and called it done. All right, and then on page 7, we give you a 3-year history of your revenue sources by type. And I will point out that the other COVID money, the CARES money, was in 2020, so that if we look in that intergovernmental column, that's why that orange bar was so high, because that was the year you had the CARES money. Then it dropped down a little bit in 2021, and then the increase in the black in 2022 is related to some of that ARPA spending and then the increase in LGA. The property taxes, like I mentioned, is your main source of revenue. Steady increase there, just like the increase in the budget we saw in the previous page. So when we look at the expenditures by program on page 8, here the first group's your general government, fairly consistent from 2021 to 2022. Public safety, again, that increase in 2020, the orange bar is really related to the CARES spending. And then you saw a drop in 2021, and again in 2022, mainly related to building inspection and development driven. Public Works did have an increase in 2022, really related to maintenance and utilities were the big contributors. And then the other column does include the transfers, so it includes that $69,000 transfer out to close your 2020 street improvement project. So now if we look at the next set of funds, you do have 5 special revenue funds. Here we give you comparison of ending fund balance compared to the previous year. So in total, you have about $2.7 million here, an increase of $312,000. The bulk of that is in your fire special, which is ending fund balance of about 1.4 million. Your park and recreation, 676,000. The restricted ones here are the next two, so your small cities has a small balance, so it's restricted for a specific purpose. And then your EDA, that's been growing over the past few years up to about 513,000 restricted for those specific EDA purposes. And then the community center increased a little bit, about $7,200 and 95,000. The graph there at the bottom just gives you an idea of the breakout of those fund balances. Like I mentioned, the EDA and the small cities is restricted. That first group of funds, you can see that's increased a little bit each of the 3 years. And then the other funds are made up of committed and assigned, really driven by the council and the city, how those can be spent. When we move on to the capital project funds, here there's 4 funds listed, 3 of them remaining at the end of the year. The 2020 street improvement was closed out with that transfer. Your general capital project fund increased about 542,000 up to about 1.5 million. That's all internally assigned. You have your downtown improvement fund, which was funded by bonds issued in 2021. So at the end of 2021, you had about 5.3 million, with that being restricted for specific purposes, so the downtown improvement project. I spent the majority of that down, about 4.1 million. You have about 1.2 million left in here for future street projects that you have planned with the issue of those funds. And then you have a deficit in that AUAR fund of about 272 million, which it sounds like you're probably doing another project and hoping that that's eliminated with future development.
Yeah, we're working on updating the AURR right now, and then to pass those costs on to future development, so. Hopefully.
All right, on page 11, lists your governmental debt service funds. So there is additional debt in your enterprise funds, so your water, sewer, storm. Here you have about 6.6 million of bonds outstanding with future interest payments of about 1.4 million, maturing anywhere from 2025 out to 2042. So with these, it's just important to monitor the sources coming in to make sure you're going to meet your principal and interest payments, which we do give you a 10-year picture there. Goes up a little bit through 2025, and then as when those bonds drop off and a few more, you can see that drops down to fairly steady from 2028 to 2032, assuming no other debt was issued. So we get into the enterprise funds. So these funds will give you a 4-year picture of your cash flows from operations, plus your debt service, so your principal and interest, and then the cash balance. I think the thing that stands out in all these funds is the increase in cash in 2021. It's really related to those 2021 bonds. So the portion of water, sewer, storm is allocated to these funds. Most of that was spent out in 2022. That's the biggest cost for the decrease in cash, which you see in that bottom graph there. Up on that top graph, here we give you a cash flow from operations. So the cash coming in is the orange bar. Your operating costs going out is the yellow. So you can see you generated cash flow from operations each of the years presented. And then we add on your debt service, principal, and interest. With that, you're pretty much break even in 2021. 2022, you use a little cash flow from operations there. So mainly because the costs went up. So I think there's some more repair and maintenance in the water fund this year. So important to watch those water rates and ensure you meet your obligations. Sewer fund on the next slide, page 13. Again, like I mentioned, the decrease in cash there is really related to spending those bond proceeds in the downtown improvement project. And here, looking at the top graph, generated sufficient cash flow to cover operations and debt service. That gap between the orange and the yellow and black. So page 14 is the stormwater fund. Again, similar trend of spending money for that downtown improvement project. So it looks like most of you have the new slide there. So that's where previous 2021, we didn't have any debt in the stormwater fund. Started paying some of that in 2022. So you'll see that black portion of the bottom in 2022. I'm still generating enough cash flow to cover operations and debt service. Wastewater treatment fund. You're looking at that top graph, pretty much a break even in 2021 between cash flows from operation and debt service. With those costs increasing in 2022, that orange or the yellow portion of the bar, that drove up using some of the cash, which is reflective of that cash decrease in 2022. Then now on the next page, page 16, we look at all those funds together, those general categories, with the general fund being orange on the bottom, followed by the dark green, your capital projects, special revenue funds, the yellow, the black, your debt service funds, and then the enterprise funds, the light green. The biggest reason, again, for that decrease from 2021 to 2022 is those unspent bond proceeds that in 21 being spent on the downtown improvement project in 2022. It's a little more comparable from 2020 to 2022. You can see that the total cash has been increasing. We talked about in the EDA, your capital improvement fund, and your general fund. So now looking at some key performance indicators to give the city of Montrose, is the black line. All cities of the fourth class in the state, the orange, and then cities in Wright County, the yellow. So the first two ones are here, tax related. So you have your tax rate followed by your taxes per capita. Both fairly steady over the 4 years presented, and under both those peer group comparisons. And the next one is page 18, are the two debt-related KPIs. The first one's the debt per capita. You can see when you issued those, the downtown improvement bonds in 2021, that number jumped up. That'll continue to drop down as you pay down that debt, unless you issue some more bonds. And then the next one there on that page is just comparing your principal and interest payments to your total expenditures. And I think that debt service requirement will also probably see that go up a little bit next year. Then page 19 is the governmental expenditures. The first one's your current expenditures, real consistent over the 4 years presented, with the black bar being the city of Montrose and under both of your groups. And then the capital expenditures, you'll see that one jumped up in 2022, again due to the spending on the downtown improvement project. So that's all the information that summarizes all the financial information, the results of the audit. I'm happy to take any questions or if you guys have any comments.
When you have an overage, whether it's because of debt or operating costs, it comes out of the general fund at that point, if it's not covered? Or where does it come out? That might be a more of a micro question, but. So like looking at the wastewater treatment fund, I mean, we were, whatever, 10% or 15% over.
So currently that came out cash reserves in the wastewater treatment fund. So you do have a significant healthy cash balance in that fund, so that the 1 year ups and downs come out of that cash balance. So it's really important to look at that from a trend perspective too. Now, let's say it started going into the deficit, that could be funded by, it needs to be funded by somewhere, so it could be the general fund. You could use any of the unrestricted funds to cover that.
And that's where we increase rates for next year. On some of those funds.
questions?
Seems like we're probably good.
So at the council meeting and just like previous years, I'm not gonna go through the whole presentation unless you really want me to. I'll just get up and say that we went through it and see if you have any other questions, let them know that it was a clean audit. Make it pretty short. Feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
We're good? Thank you. Okay, we're adjourned then.